InDigital is on a mission to improve the 911 industry. Our goal is to create something better to go above and beyond the current standards. Our passion for creating the most advanced, well-designed solutions led to our position as an industry leader in next-gen core services. For the millions of calls processed over our emergency IP networks, to our Text for 911 solution, Texty, to our disaster recovery and backup solution, Mevo, it's easy to see we love what we do. For more information, check us out at www.indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why, since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 343 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is supported by and sponsored by InDigital, as well as Rapid Deploy. And man, a lot is going on. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's August 31st, 2020, and we are moving very quickly to October for Dare to Be Great. In the fall, we're back. It is going to be excellent. There's about 24 speakers, something like that. Several industry partners are going to be taking part in the vendor hall sessions, and it is just going to be excellent. Make sure to register as soon as you can so that you can get in there. There's so much that's going to be coming. I'm actually building an addition to my current website that will hold all of the information on there that will make it so much easier for all of you to do. And I'm trying to do this in like 2 days. I've already got 2 out of about the 7 pages done that I'm doing for this website. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited. Everyone is excited, and it is going to be excellent. So thank you all for the support. Also, a shout out to patrons. Thank you for everything that you do. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without all of you, especially everyone else who listens and supports and watches everything and sponsors InDigital and Rapid Deploy. So thank you all very much, and we're about to get started. So my guest today, we've been talking back and forth. We met back at a National APCO conference during an Imagine listening session. We're talking there, shared story, and there's a lot we have to talk about today, and it is going to be good. I'm excited. And my guest today is Anne, and she is an assistant director of admin and training at the City of Cambridge City Emergency Department. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Ricardo.
How's it going?
It's going great. It's
right.
Monday morning.
That's right. It is, right?
Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday. And if you're like Garfield, if you know Garfield, he hates Mondays, but we're going to make the best of it.
We are. This is a good start to my day.
Yeah, this is going to be good. Now, as I was saying in the beginning, we've kind of been in contact here and there on social media, And then we spoke at that APCO conference. You were in the Imagine Listening session, and it was excellent to get a chance to talk to you there. But now we're going to learn even more about you and what you do.
Sounds good. Let's dig in.
So, how did you get into public safety to begin with?
So, long story short, no, it's going to be a really long story. Um, so, we moved here when I was 13. My parents are Brazilian. I was born in Brazil. And we moved here in 98 because my dad's family all lived here. And my mom decided that it would be better to raise us here instead of Brazil. So, we moved. Um, and I've always been interested in true crime shows. The first things I was watching when I moved here was SVU and Criminal Minds and all that stuff. So that began this little seed of something in the back of my mind. So when I was going to college, I told my mother at one point that I wanted to be a nurse. And she says to me, "Why would you want to be a nurse if you can be a doctor?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, and I think you know what I'm talking about with the Latino moms, where
Yeah.
they're very pushy and they want you to do the best and they want you to be the best.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to win with her. I got to find a career that she is not going to know anything about, or she's not going to be able to say, well, why would you want to do this if you could do that? So I started researching and I knew I wanted to do psychology as a major as well, but ended up doubling up between criminology and psychology. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I want to be an FBI agent, or maybe I want to be just a simple police officer. I just want to be a police officer and be in law enforcement or probation officer or something. So I graduate about a semester early because I ended up taking a ton of classes online. And my mom came across she's very involved with the Brazilian community in the town that we lived in. And she came across a listing for looking for dispatchers, and they were looking for dispatchers that spoke Portuguese. So she, of course, calls me at work. I was working wholesale for a company at the time. She calls me at work and she's like, "You need to apply for this position. It's your foot in the door. You can become a police officer and then move on from there." And I'm like, "Okay, great, mom, thanks. I'm actually quite happy at my job now, but I will give this a try." So I apply. I didn't even think I was gonna really even get a chance. I didn't have any experience. All I had was my, criminology double major in psychology degree, and I spoke Portuguese. So I go in for my interview, and of course, like I'm a super nice kid, very quiet, very soft spoken, and I'm being interviewed by six men, very intimidating men. And they look at me and they're like, "Yeah, you're going to get eaten alive, Trilla, but we'll take you because you speak Portuguese. At this point, we'll take anybody. You have a pulse, we'll take you." So they sent me to a 7-week academy. And when I get back to the station, they're like, "Yep, here's your mic, here's your phone, have fun." And I was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that's how it all started. The idea was to become a police officer.
Mhm.
The girl that actually started with me around the same time, she's a sergeant now. She actually went ahead and became a police officer. I decided to stay in 911. I loved it. I wanted to, I felt like I was making a difference, being behind the mic and being, under the headset. So here I am, and it's almost 14 years later, and I still love it.
Dang. So okay, let's rewind a little bit because I had to chuckle as you're talking about, Latino moms.
Yeah.
Because so my mom is, definitely the same way. "Oh, mijo, that sounds really good. But what about this? Or you could do this, or just
Yeah.
the same way." And then it's funny because I had when I first started out, I had, only retail management, and so that's what I was looking for, and she ended up telling me out of nowhere while I'm staying with her, "Well, 1, do you think you wanna go look for a job?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm freeloading, I guess." And then 2, "Hey, your cousin's, husband knows the chief of police, and they're looking for dispatchers." And I said, I don't know what they do." And she goes, "Why don't you go try it?" And I said, "Oh, okay." So kind of like you, I
Yeah.
went. I wasn't in front of a bunch of dudes though. I only had two, but they were enough where they're firing questions back and forth, and I ended up. There was a few months that had passed. I thought I screwed up. I thought I did really well, but because it took so long for them to come get back to me, I thought I screwed up. And the chief of police shows up out of nowhere one day, and he's like, "Do you still want the job?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "All right, well, you start tonight." And my training was simply watching or getting introduced to everything that was in the room, watching my trainer take a 911 call, and then now it's your turn. And it was
Yeah.
it was something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And it's funny because the agency that I worked for, they still had officers on the desk. And I remember like just my heart would beat so fast every time that phone rang, every time that radio came on, every time anything happened, because I'm like, oh my God, they're going to yell at me. Oh my God, they're going to yell at me. They are going to yell at me. That's all I could think about. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get yelled at. Ah,
Oh, it's interesting because so I did that week of just going through it, just basically getting thrown into the pit as
yeah.
you're this is how how you're gonna do it. What's the term, like baptism by fire type thing. And it was the following week that actually no, it was 2 weeks later actually that I ended up doing a basic 40-hour new dispatcher training that they had me go to. There was a lot of stuff that I learned there, but when I came back, it was just me by myself for 8 hours. So
Wow.
when it hit the fan, it really hit the fan. And this is in Florida, so if there was ever a time where an orange grove would catch fire, it was a pretty big deal. It would get nuts, and it's just me in there, and I can oh man, you got me flashbacking now. I have I can see myself in my seat rolling back to find this book because I had to get a hold of like DNR and all these different people, Department of Forestry, to take a plow out there to start like taking it down, and just rolling all over the place in the little dispatch center that I was in, trying to get this all taken care of on my own.
Oh yeah, I remember like when I was getting trained on sieges, there was one woman that worked there. Um, the dispatch center was pretty much a revolving door, but there was one woman that worked there, and she was there for like 28 years.
Mhm.
And I remember she threw this huge book. It was like this thick in front of me, and she goes, "Here's everything that you need for sieges. You can't really break the system, so that's your training." And I was like, huh, "What? What?" And it was still like the old teletype with the blue screen and the
Oh
trip
yeah.
button and everything. And I remember like, this is a whole complete different language. I don't speak this.
Right.
But it's truly like trial by fire.
Um, for those who are watching and listening that don't know what CGIS is, what is CGIS?
It's the criminal justice information systems. So it's what we use um, to input stolen vehicles, missing people, warrants, all that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of things started changing like even the last 6 months before I was done dispatching where, you know, there were some fields that were optional, and then they had changed it where you had to fill every single thing out. And if there wasn't something in there, you'd have to get a hold of the officer or the
Yeah.
court, and whichever, whether it be circuit or district, and you'd have to get a hold of them and say, "Look, you didn't fill this out right. I need this," or fax me another one. And then you're sitting there and there's just stacks of papers on
Yeah.
and in my center. That station, that console was called lean. And so when you were sitting at the lean console and there was a stack of papers there, you're like, damn it. I got a lot of
I
stuff to put in.
hated entering warrants. They were my enemy. And if you got one thing wrong, like you had to take it all out and enter
Right.
it all in again. And
Mhm.
I remember just sitting there and being like, I'm never going to learn this. And of course, they would leave everything for me because, of course, the new girl will just take
Right.
care of it.
Yeah, you're the new one. You're the new one, and you gotta learn. So
Yep. Yep.
you you're the one who's gotta get in there. So you get in there, And what is that like for you when you get in there? Could you remember your first day? Like, what is it that you're looking at when you walk in, and were you
Oh my god.
overwhelmed at all?
Yeah, I had no idea. I had never been in there
Hmm.
before my first day.
Oh, so no
So
sit along or anything.
nothing. I came into the station. I went straight upstairs for my interview.
Hmm.
Went back home. Did all the paperwork. Did everything. And went to a 7-week academy put on by the state, which is offsite. Um, and then came back in, and it was the first time I actually went into dispatch. And I remember looking at all these buttons because we still had the old consoles with all the buttons and all these monitors and things. And I'm like, whoa, like I love computers, but this is kind of crazy. Like, where's solitaire?
Yeah, right. Where's Minesweeper?
Exactly. Exactly. And I remember just sitting there and being like, how am I going to know what, even trying to understand what they were saying over the radio was so hard for me. And I mean, I'm pretty good with accents and trying to decipher things, but that first day, I was just like, one, you're like, you have no idea what's expecting you. Two, I just went through this like 7-week academy that played the most horrific calls I could ever listen to. And every time that phone rang, I thought that's what I was gonna get. I thought I
Oh
was gonna
man.
get a murder. I thought I was gonna get a suicide. And I was just like, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah, and
But
instead, probably one of your first calls is somebody saying, yeah, so my neighbor's dog keeps coming into my yard, like, I'm not sure what to do." And it's those types of calls that ends up making you think, "Okay, not everything that's coming into 911 is an emergency, but for those callers, it's their emergency." So then you
oh,
have to learn how to, respond, that
oh yeah.
whole
Yep.
emotional intelligence.
Yep. Well, trial by fire, since we're talking about trial by fire, my very, very first call, and again, I'm brand new, had never been in dispatch before, had never seen anything. And I get a call from one of the officers. Apparently, we had had um, a home invasion earlier in the day before I came in, and he was actually off duty, had listened to the radio earlier, had learned about the truck that they were looking for and everything. So the very very first call I ever took was this one officer calling in to give me the information because he was following the truck of the guy that did the home invasion. I was so flustered, I couldn't even say his name. I couldn't say the guy's name. And I remember just being like so frozen in that moment. Like he's giving me all this information and this plate number and the description of the truck and everything. And I'm just like, and finally he says, give me to so and so, who was my partner, had been there like a month before me. And I'm like, excuse me, I think he wants to talk to you. And this was the big joke, like of the department for the next month. I would not hear the end of it. It was just like, oh my God, the new girl didn't even know how to say my name. Like she couldn't even get my name right. Like nothing. I got nothing out of that call. And I remember just sitting there and being like, I'm gonna get fired, I'm gonna get fired, I'm gonna get fired. And they he became one of my best friends later on, and everything kind of mellowed over, and it was checked up to, yeah, she's new, she doesn't know what she's doing yet. But I think that's when they realized that they were like, okay, yeah, we did send her to an academy, but we actually have to give her some actual like training and show her some of the stuff before she can
Right.
actually do the job. um, but yeah, I'm like, I'm waiting for that murder call to come through, or like the suicide. I'm like, oh, I took suicide prevention, so I'll know how to say it. And then here comes this guy out of the left field. Hey, this is Officer so and so, and I'm behind this vehicle, and blah, blah, and there was a home invasion, and I couldn't even like think fast enough to kind of follow what he was saying. I was just like stunned, and I stopped, and I just like, I didn't have a reaction, and finally he says, "Give me to the other girl." I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because you go into an academy or anything like that, and they're teaching you all of these different things, and probably how to speak to people and such, and what happens in this situation or that situation. But when you get to it, like the incident types are the same, but the actual situation, what's going on, they're always different. And then
Oh,
you're trying in the beginning to wrap your head around the fact that you're listening, but you're also listening to the entire room.
Yep.
You are typing everything in, and you've also got to get the right incident type. You have to pull up the CAD call, the portion for those who are listening who don't know or watching. Um, your computer aided dispatch where you're typing in all the information to get it to the radio dispatcher that ends up going out to the officers out on their laptops. But all of that stuff is going on, and I remember in the beginning too, just kind of tripping out 'cause when I started out in Florida, small police department. The call volume, not that much. I mean, we had, I think, maybe 10 or 12 sworn officers, and there was only a few of us dispatchers. And again, it was only one person for 8 hours. So then when I moved back home to the state of Michigan from Southwest Michigan, and I was working for Allegan County Central Dispatch, that's the county that I grew up in. So I'm working there, but the call volume is a lot different. We've got a minimum of 3 on the weekdays and then 4 on the weekends. So there's a lot of calls that are coming in. So switching from that was a lot different. My first domestic call that I took was the same way as you, where I got a little flustered. We had an older CAD system, and I remember looking at my trainer and saying, "I think you need to take this one. I can't get the CAD call in." And she goes, "You can do this. Just concentrate. You've got this. I'm not doing it for you." And I'm glad she did that because it was the kick in the ass that I needed. And I got it in, got it through it, and everything was completely fine. From then on, I was good to go with calls, but it was that one in the beginning that I was like, "Shit, I don't know if I can do this."
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I remember like even leaving the interview because as I
Mhm.
said, like I had never been in an interview situation where I'm being interviewed by 6 men who are completely freaking intimidating because they're huge, and I'm like this tiny little girl, like, haha, okay. And and I remember leaving and calling my mom and like literally in tears. And she's like, "What's going on? What happened?" I'm like, if I have to go through one more of these things, I don't want this job anymore. I'm gonna go back to my whole sales job. That's what I'm gonna do. I don't even care." And after that came the psych evaluation, and I wanted to like just, yeah, I was like, I'm ready to be committed right after the psych eval. Um, but it was fine. I mean, I passed, so
Yeah, you made it through, and here you are.
and here I am. Yeah, it's an interesting career choice, I say. Like,
Mhm.
I'm the only one in my family who actually does anything with government or law enforcement. Everybody else in my house is normal, so it's amazing. And they don't understand me. They say I talk a different language, and
Oh,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, with everything. I can see that with pretty much everything. I mean, when I talk to people on the phone, when I call them for I could be ordering a pizza and
Yep.
they'll say, how do you spell your name?" And I'll phonetically spell it. Or or I'll still throw out some terminology or something, and my family's just looking at me, and I'm like, "What?" Like, "You're not in dispatch anymore." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"I know, but I did it for 13 and a half years, and it's always gonna be with me. I'm always gonna
It's
phonetically spell
ingrained. It
something."
is ingrained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the we're at a restaurant and I can like hear every other conversation going on behind us. And I'll be like, "Oh wow." And my husband's like, "Stop doing that. Like people are going to realize you're listening to their conversation." I'm like, "Did you hear that though? Like that's pretty interesting."
I know, right? Yeah, like, that person over there, man, like, they're
Yeah.
keep seeing this person and that person at the same time. Like, "How did you hear that?" Like, we're just gonna continue eating. I'm sorry."
Yep, sorry, sorry.
Yeah,
And now
it's
my
dispatch
kids
here.
also have like this thing where they go, "Mom, stop dispatching me. Mom, you're doing your dispatch thing again."
Yeah, I so I haven't done this in a long time, but this is years ago now. But I remember my wife and I were, I don't know, we were arguing about something small, and I wasn't paying attention to how I was talking, and she had just stopped, and I said, "What?" And she goes, "I'm not one of your callers." And I said, "What?"
Yep,
And
in there.
I started laughing, and I said, "Okay, obviously this whatever we're having this little spat about, this is stupid. So Go eat
Yeah.
some chicken wings or something.
Yeah. No, my husband says it too. He's like, "Stop interrogating me." And I'm like, "Sorry, that's the dispatcher talking, not me."
Right, but there's a lot of things that end up coming with it as well, like, I don't know about you, but I and I still do it sometimes now, like, I become, like, ultra suspicious, like, people are going by, the house, I'm like, "I wonder what they're up to."
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the first time your kid had a play date? Because I
Uh,
do.
yeah?
That
Like,
did not go
what
very
happened?
well. The stuff going on in my head.
That is funny, yeah, like
I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna come into your house now," and I'm like looking at everything, and I'm like, and then the mom's like waiting for me to leave, right? Because it was a drop off play date, and I'm like, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. I'm not comfortable with this conversation. I'm not comfortable leaving her."
it's it's craziness, but, I think to me, it's good for some things because then I think outside of the box or stuff that
Right.
people usually wouldn't think about. And, I see kids sometimes just on their swings and they're twisting it around and then
Mhm.
allow themselves, to go back around. I'm like, probably shouldn't be doing that. And I
Yeah.
told my kids too, I'm like, don't spin like that or don't twist it like that. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I've taken too many phone calls from kids who get tangled up in the swings, and I'll just
Yep.
tell them straight up, and they're like, "That can happen?" I'm like, anything can happen."
Right. Right. Yeah. I think my kids have heard like a few of the crazy calls I've had with like kid stuff, but it's mostly like, "Mom, you're worrying for nothing." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be right outside as you do your play date. I'll be sitting outside. I will watch this house, make sure there's nothing going on in here."
You get you get your binoculars to, like,
Yep, yep.
"Alright,
It's
everything's
funny
still
because,
alright."
like, I've talked to the mom afterwards, like, we became good friends, and I've talked to her afterwards, and I was like, "I was so tempted to run your plate." And if I knew that I wasn't gonna get in trouble, I would have run.
Oh, man, that is hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, dispatcher mom right here, and I'm
Yep.
like, "Yeah, no, I'll be sitting outside waiting for you."
Yeah. No, my kids have tons of fun and stuff, and I'll go out there and we'll do, underdog swings and all the other stuff, and it's fun, but, man, there's just some times in the back of my head, I'm like, "Hmm, maybe I shouldn't be doing this."
Right?
Oh, geez. So you get in there, you've gone through this training, and there's a lot that's going on. You've got that first call under your belt.
Yep.
How did you feel about, I guess, the profession then afterwards? And I guess also, were you doing a lot of translating? You said that they were looking for someone who could speak Portuguese. So was there a lot of translating that you were doing as well then?
Yeah, so, right, so I used to work day shift, which never
Mhm.
happens, right? Like, you're the new person and you get day shift, like, no, no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I worked in that agency, I worked day shift, my whole career. So, it was amazing. I mean, for family life and everything, but, I remember just, like, all the business, like, day-to-day stuff, even, like, helping out in records. "Oh, I need a copy of a report." The city where I grew up here in Massachusetts is Framingham. It's one of the largest Brazilian populations in Mass.
Mhm.
So there's a lot, and there's of everything. So I did a lot of interviews with the police officers and being the interpreter, and that landed me in court way more times than I cared to go to court. Um, Especially when I had to translate in Spanish because
Mhm.
I do speak Spanish as well. Um, but it was just like, but it's not my first language. It's not, I learned it after, but I'm not a certified translator. So
Mhm.
that landed me in court also a few times. And, but yeah, I mean, I loved it. I loved being a part of it. And I think that's, now being in the admin side of things, that's what I miss is like being a part of that, like investigation and being a part of this big case that's developing and actually like being out there and doing stuff. So I do miss that.
I had when I was working in um Allegan in Michigan, I would get those calls all the time. and there's a section in Allegan, the southwest corner, where there was a huge um, Spanish speaking population there. And it's an area that I know as well. And because I have family that lived in that area too. So every time someone would call in that just remotely sounded like they were Spanish speaking, they would cover the phone or put them on hold, or I would hear un momento. And I'm probably doing
Mhm.
something for NCIC where I'm entering something in, and they'd call over and say, "Ricardo, I need you to translate." And I would always start speaking English first because a lot of the times they could speak English, they just had
Yep.
a real thick accent. So I would speak in English the whole way through, and then I would get done with the call, and whoever had sent it over, they'd say, "What the hell?" I'm like, "What? Like, they spoke English?" I'm like, "Yeah, you just have to really listen to what they were saying." But, other times as well, I would actually, do the translating. But for me, my Spanish, so I'm 100% Mexican. However, my parents, who are also this, they are fluent in the language, but they taught me English first. So, the Spanish that I learned was listening to them talk to my mom's mom because she only spoke Spanish.
Right.
So my siblings and I just picked it up and picked it up because we had to communicate with her somehow. And so I always say mine is a little more broken than fixed, but I can get through. I can get through it. But when I was working in dispatch, some of the words weren't the same as what I thought they were. So I
Mhm.
actually had to go into Google Translate during a domestic once to look up weapons because I was asking, do they have any weapons? And what I don't even remember what I was saying, but what I was saying wasn't right because she wasn't understanding me. And then I looked it up and it's armas, and I was like, armas, like what? Like I didn't realize that's what it was, and it's just like an address. um, I was asking them where their house was located, and they were telling me the city. I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm not saying it right." And in that moment, I couldn't think of the word for address, and it was dirección. I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
lord, like, this is craziness." Like, I'm learning a lot of different stuff on here, so it was pretty interesting to be able to do that on 911.
And I'm sure like the different dialects too, right? Like if you go from speaking with somebody from Mexico versus somebody from Puerto Rico versus somebody from the
Mhm,
Dominican, and then all the slang, because that like totally drove me insane. Was like when I had to translate Portuguese, I was a little bit better.
mhm.
As long as it was Brazilian Portuguese. If it was Portuguese from Portugal, we were in trouble because it was the same thing. Like I would have to like, whoa, because they are different, dialects and different ways of saying things and different words used for diff- same words used for complete different things.
Right.
But yeah, when I had to speak with in Spanish, especially, I was always like, okay, I got to be really careful about what I say because if this ends up in court, I'm gonna have to justify why I was
Right.
using this word instead of another one, or so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but
a
I would do the
hard
same.
thing.
I would always start in English, always.
Yeah. There was one thing that I was always afraid of, excuse me, and it was translating in Spanish on a medical, because it's one thing to do a domestic, it's a high priority call, very fast paced and all, but medicals for whatever reason are even more, maybe because it's that the thought of, with a medical, it's straight up life and death, where a domestic, it's not always life and death. It could be just a verbal one that's going on. And even if
Hmm.
it was physical, a lot of times at that time, they're separated. So it's a little different. So with a medical, I had that fear of taking a medical. The last day I was in dispatch, after a 16-hour shift, I was only supposed to work from 1 to 1. The person who was supposed to come in at 1 a.m. to relieve me for my last shift, ever, like, career-wise, she'd gotten sick. So, I ended up, and I was gonna be with my team anyway, so I volunteered for those last 4 hours. I thought, "Why not go out with a bang with a 16-hour shift, with overtime?" And the very last call I took was a medical, and that I had to translate in Spanish.
Yep.
It was
And
Oh,
that
go ahead.
actually reminds me, so talking about like where you grew up, right? I grew up in Framingham, so I was dispatching in the place where I grew up. My dad's entire family has lived in Framingham. They had business, they had everything. And I remember taking a call for my grandfather
Mhm.
and just kind of like, okay, well, do I address the fact that it's my grandfather?
Yeah.
My grandfather, he had fallen and fainted and fallen in the basement of my uncle's business. And I remember taking this call and just being like, okay, do I address the fact that I know these people? Do I start EMDing this call? Do I get a translator on the line? Because I don't think I can do it in Portuguese because it's all the medical terms that I would have to use Google Translate for.
Right.
And I remember I completely botched it. And I remember just like sitting there and I sent a message to one of my officers and I was like, hey, just keep me posted because that's, my uncle's business. That's my grandfather that fell. And he shows up at the station like 2 minutes later. And I'm like, what's going on? And he tells the shift commander that he was taking me because he was going to bring me to the hospital to see my grandfather. And I was like, oh, you guys are so nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you acknowledge, like, did you say who you were then?
I think I did. I was like, "Hey, it's me," but I don't think the person that I was speaking to, like one of the workers, like he didn't know me.
Oh,
So
got
I'm like,
Okay.
so I just went through the motions with them, and I'm like, okay, well, check his pulse and do this and do that, and then I'm like, holy shit, it's my grandfather. Like, there's no other 90-year-old that's that business right now.
Right, yeah.
So I remember just sitting there and being like, oh crap, like this is actual real. Like it's a real thing. Like if you this like it's something that you hear about when you're going through the classes, right? Like you're going to take a call for somebody that you know
Yeah.
and never thought it was going to happen, and then I'm like sitting there I'm like, wow, it does really happen.
Like, this is real.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then we arrested a bunch of like the people that I knew from high school and all that great stuff, and I was like, oh god, I know them.
Right, yeah, and that's an odd thing because then for lack of a better way of putting it, you know everyone's dirt. You know
Yes,
stuff that's
yes.
going on, and I would visit the town that I grew up in, Fenville, and people knew where I worked, and they would say, "So, did you hear about so and so?" I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't working that day," when in fact I knew exactly what happened and more, but I wasn't gonna
Yep.
say anything, and a lot of times people would be, kind of fishing for information. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know anything about that," but a lot of times stuff like that would happen, and I would have to decide when I'm taking a phone call from someone that I knew, do I say who I am or do I not say who I am? Depending on the
Yep.
situation, and especially if it was family, every time I had taken a call from a family member, I said who I was. And one of my aunts, I told her she was calling because somebody was breaking into a neighbor's house, and she was just hysterical. And I said, "Tia, it's me, it's Richie." And she goes, "Ay, mijo," and completely changed. She was calm and everything was fine.
Yep.
But like with a friend, I never said who I was, and because you run that risk of them possibly kind of shutting down and not wanting to say
Right.
everything because now you're speaking to somebody who knows you personally and you might kind of embarrassed.
Mhm. Yeah, I also took a call from my little cousin who came home and found the house had been broken into. And she started going through the house, and all of a sudden I'm like, no, 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 back out, back out, back out, back out, back out, leave, leave. And like she's not falling. And I'm like, it's me, get out. And I remember like the shift commander sitting behind me and coming out, and he's like, why are you yelling? I'm like, it's my cousin, it's okay.
Right. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it, it's okay.
Yeah, you
And
let
I'm
me do
like
what
telling
I'm
him,
doing.
yeah, I'm like, don't go through the house. I need you to go inside. And she's not listening. And I'm like, get out.
Oh man, that is funny. Yeah, because for those who are watching and listening, you don't want to put anybody else in harm's way. You don't want
No.
to create more victims or anything. Or if something like that were to happen, you don't want to have them going through it. So you get their asses out of the house and away from the place to be as safe as they can because there might be somebody in there. Someone might
Right.
still be in there. So with everything that you were doing, and you mentioned how, training, this was something that you always wanted to do. Um, did any of that end up coming from how your training was in the very beginning, trial by fire, like you were saying? You're getting kind of thrown in and, all this stuff that you've got to figure out on the fly, which is the job anyway. But when you're very brand new and that you just get thrown in without anything else, well, that's a hard thing. I mean, it's also, how are you going to keep people in the job if you're just throwing them in? A lot
Right.
of things have changed, of course, but was that kind of one of the, maybe some inspiration for you yourself to become a trainer and want to train people in a much better way?
I remember getting the kick in the back of the chair, and that's something that I think we're back. Are we back?
Okay, there you are. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and like I said, I remember getting, the kick in the back of the chair. And I teach the CTOs today. I'm like, you are their GPS pretty much. And I love using that analogy of the GPS. Like, your role as the CTO is to tell them stop, reroute, and continue. It's not there to be a supervisor. It's not there to be their peer. It's not there to be their, but also build those relationships, because you know what? That's the person you're going to be swapping with in a couple of months. So it is something that I've tried to build some heart into.
Now, was there any was there anything that really solidified the fact that you wanted to stay in dispatching? Because you were talking about how in the beginning, you wanted to be a police officer, you wanted to do all this other stuff, but you get into dispatch and you're taking these calls. You've got this, this inspiration to want to train more people, and to learn more, continuing education, all that. But was there something at all during that time that really just, this is the job for me?
Well, I think it was a combination of multiple
Hmm.
things. I ended up getting pregnant within a year and a half of being there.
Hmm.
And it was right around the time when I had the opportunity to take the police exam, and I'm like, well, I'm kind of pregnant. I'm not going to do it now. So, and then it was like, I actually do like the work that I'm doing now. I actually do enjoy it. I loved being part of it, but not really having to be part of it. I'm very much a germaphobe. I think just like every other dispatcher on earth, we are completely ingrained in like cleaning and making sure. And we used to help out with bookings. So every time I would be back there, like bringing paperwork back to the shift commander, I remember just standing there and like the smell of the prisoners and like just and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can touch them. I don't think I can get into a fist fight with one of these people.
Right. Just
I think I'm gonna have to bathe myself in alcohol every night.
Oh man.
So yeah, it was like my love for like teaching and training and all that
Mhm.
stuff, but also um, part of it was very selfish and me just being like, I don't think it's for me. I can't deal with this.
But that's a good thing. It's a good thing that you ended up seeing all of that early
Yeah.
on,
Oh
because
yeah.
I think about if you had actually gone into the academy first or whichever, and then gone through some of that stuff, and then realized, maybe this
Yeah.
isn't it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely good that you got that early exposure and everything to it, because it led you to where you're at now. And
Definitely.
I
I
can
definitely did.
I can see it in your face. I can hear it in your voice that you love what you do, and that's an amazing thing. Um, throughout your career, are there any calls that just kind of stick with you, whether it be a save or anything like that? One that you know is just
So my I am 911 story is the one that like I've always it's kind of haunted me for a little while until I
Mhm.
started dealing with the peer support stuff, and I actually had a full debriefing of that call after 10 years almost.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
when I was taking the peer support class, we needed an example, and I brought it up and I said, my I am 911 story is I took a suicide call from a woman who came home after leaving 10 minutes prior to drop the kids off at school, comes back home and finds the husband hanging in the garage. And what bothered me was not the fact that, I had to tell her to cut him down and to do CPR and counting with her. Like that stuff, it's textbook. I was going through the motions with her at that point. It was my muscle memory, just thinking back to my training, and this is what we're doing. But it was the screaming in between every time she pumped his chest. And what she was saying was, what am I going to tell my children? And she was asking me. I felt like she was asking me. And she said, what am I going to tell them? What am I going to tell? Like, that's all she kept saying to me. And I couldn't answer her. I'm like, I don't know, And I just kind of kept like ignoring it, and just kind of going, nope, let's pump faster. And 1 and 2, and I'll count with you. And every time, like, she was counting and she would go 1, and she's like, what am I going to tell my kids? And I can still hear her screams. Today, it's much easier after we did the whole debriefing during the peer support training. And I came to terms with like the fact that, yeah, I was angry with that guy because he ruined his kids, or I thought he was ruining his kids, and I couldn't help her. We ended up actually when the fire department got there, they actually found a pulse. So we actually restarted him after he like hung himself. He ended up dying in the hospital. Luckily, like I said, we still had officers in the office. So I would always find out what was happening at the end of my calls. And I ended up finding that, oh, yay, they got a pulse. And then, about an hour and a half later, I get a call from the hospital that says, hi, you need to send an officer back out because that guy just passed away. So I was like, oh, great. So that's one that really stuck with me as like my one that I needed help with, and I didn't know I needed help with. I remember when I sent you that I Am 911 poster, my husband read it and he said, why, you've never talked about this? And I was like, well, I don't bring work home usually. And I think that was the time when he finally started to understand what I did for a living for all those years. And just kind of like he started to really think about how it affected me. Because he used to always say, he's like, you were one person before you started this job and you're a much different person now. It's not that it's worse or better. It's just that you're different. And he didn't understand why I was so different, or why I was so jaded with everything, or why I was so cynical about certain things, or so, suspicious of certain things.
Right.
But after the poster, after I made the poster and I showed it to him just to be like, hey, do you think this is okay to send to Ricardo? And he's like, why didn't you ever tell me about this? And I'm like, because I didn't think it was needed. But yeah, so that was one that really stood out. And I also had a couple of like one standoff that lasted about 8 hours. That one was tough because I was on the radio for 8 hours. And I also took the call. So it was like, I took a call from a 14-year-old saying, my dad has a gun. He's walking around and he wants a police officer to kill him. And okay, great. Now I have this 14-year-old on the phone. I'm trying to track the dad, ping the phone, and ends up that one of the officers that worked with me was friends with this guy. So he ended up going back into the house. The kids are outside. The officer's trying to get him to come out, and it turned into an 8-hour standoff. And that was kind of crazy. They ended up getting him out, peacefully. There were no shots fired or anything, but that was one of the crazy ones too.
Yeah, there's a lot, that and that's why I love doing this show with the most vital piece of public safety, you and all the rest of the Thin Gold line, because these are the stories that need to get out there. This is what people don't understand, whether it be the general public, family members, friends, whichever. I would have, friends that would ask me about certain calls and stuff, and like, you don't need to know, or you don't want to know. And they say, no, man, I can handle it. And I remember telling a story once and they're just kind of staring at me and they're like, that's what you do for a living? And I said, yeah, that's what I do for a living. And it's by sharing that people can understand a lot more.
Well, it's funny because one of the guys that I used to work with, one of the officers, he went to high school with me. So our 10-year reunion happened, or was about to happen, and we're talking about it. We're like, "Are you gonna go?" And I'm like, Probably not." And he's like, "Well, we should go." And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I was the foreign kid in high school. Like, I didn't make a lot of friends, so no, it's okay. And then he says, "Well, fine, but can we like put a plan together if we do go? Like, if you do go?" And I'm like, "Sure." He goes, "I'm telling people I work for the DPW." All right. And he's like, "So if they ask me about you, I'm going to say that you work at the DPW too." And I'm like, Okay. All right." And I remember just sitting there and thinking about it. And I'm like, oh my God, what if they ask me anything about the DPW? Like, I don't know anything. But it was just because we didn't want to, one, like, I think when I first started, I used to go to parties and stuff and tell people what I did for a living and think it was like this great big thing. And they'd be like, "Oh, you must have some great stories." And I would tell something like my suicide story, and they'd be like, oh. And I'm like, or I would tell like a story about an armed robbery and how it was great and how like they were chasing him through the woods and they tackled him and all of a sudden it would be like, "Oh, and you think that was fun?" I'm like, "Yeah, I live for this stuff."
Right. Yeah, yeah. People on the outside
Mhm.
looking in, they don't understand that. Where I would, and I've said it many, many times. This is episode 343, but I'll say it again because it happened. Family or friends would ask how things were going on, and I would say, "Oh, it's been kind of slow." And they'd say, "Wasn't that a good thing? Like that means nobody needs help." And I'd say, "Well, yeah, but I'm there to help people. So I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want emergencies to be coming in because people are getting hurt. However, that's what I'm there to do, and I enjoy helping and everything that's going on. So that's why I say it that way. That the general
Yes.
public doesn't understand. I had
And they
mentioned,
don't understand.
yes,
They
yeah,
really don't get it. And like my mom was the same way. She's like, "You have the worst humor ever. Like you're the like you think the most sordid things are so funny." And I'm like, "Mom, you don't understand the stuff that I deal with." In terms of funny stories though, like I did tell somebody once, and I tell like when I'm teaching customer service, this is one of the stories that I tell all the time. It's like
uh,
you can be the nicest person ever, and at one point something's going to push your buttons and you're going to react in a way that you never thought you would, right? I was about like 7 or 8 months pregnant at this point. It's like late fall, and I get a call from this guy, and he starts out the call as, "These effing Brazilians are blowing their lawns and stuff's coming into my yard and blah blah blah." And we had already been there earlier, and the officer had said, "There's no problem here. They're landscapers. What do you want them to do? Like this is their job." So this guy is going back and forth, and I'm just taking it on, and I'm like, "Okay, now you've just offended my race. You've offended me personally, and I pay your salary, and you guys have to come back and all that stuff." And all of a sudden, I go, and I remember just like saying it and then like thinking about it. Right? I go, "Sir, I can't make God stop blowing the wind."
yes,
And I heard click on the other end, and I'm like, "Shoot, he's going to call the chief." And I'm going to be upstairs in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Phone rings. "And can you come to my office?" "Of course." So I walk my very pregnant body upstairs and I go, "Yes, how can I help you?" He goes, "Oh, I just, got a very interesting call from Mr. So and so." And I'm like, "Yes, lay on my punishment." And he starts laughing. The chief is just like laughing, falling off the chair laughing. And I'm like, "So I'm not in trouble?" "No, you're still in trouble, but this was great."
yeah, yeah. Still gonna write you up, but just
Yeah, but
know I know what you're talking about.
yeah, but I tell people all the time, it's like it's that one thing. Like I used to be super calm on the phone. Things don't really, I let them roll and it's fine. It is what it is. But the one thing is like, do not offend my race. Do not like, and not just my race, but any race. Or just,
Yeah.
don't do these effing this or these eff. It's just it's gonna get us off to a. And later on, I went to classes about like how to put those hot topic buttons and kind of work with that. But it's tough. It's still tough for me today.
Yeah, it definitely is. When I started out working in Florida, I took a call once from this sweet little old lady, and I knew who she was because she was my neighbor. But the house across from us, there were several guys that lived there, and they were migrant workers, and they worked at a one of the groves that was close there. And every Friday, they would work all Friday. They'd be working all week, but the end at the end of the week on Friday, they would all have at least a case or two of beer, and excuse me, they would be sitting outside, and I would see them. They'd be grilling, they'd be outside, they'd have music going, and they would just be taking it down. And they deserve to have that. They've been working all week. It never bothered me. So this one time, early Saturday morning, I was working a 6 a to 2 p shift, and I go in and I answer the phone and I hear dun, 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 and and this little old lady, she goes, "I'm sorry, but can you this is so and so, I got all of her information." And she goes, "Can you send an officer out there? These Mexicans are playing their music. You know what kind of music I'm talking about?" And without thinking, I said, "Yes, ma'am. I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm Mexican too. I can hear the music. I know what it is." and and she
Yep.
goes, "Oh, I so what's your name?" And I said, "My name's Ricardo." And then she goes, "You don't sound like a Ricardo." And and I said,
Oh,
"Oh, well, thank you, ma'am." I said, "I'll get somebody out there for you. Don't worry about it." And she goes, "You know what? Never mind. It's really not that bad." And I said, "It's okay. I'll have someone do a run through." And she goes, "Okay, I'm sorry." And I said, "Ma'am, it's okay. Don't even worry about it."
you don't sound like a Ricardo.
Yeah.
I usually get the, well, Anne's not a Brazilian name. No, what's the Brazilian name? Maria?
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Or, well, you don't look Brazilian. I'm like, but Brazilians are just like Americans. Like we come in all packages, and
Yeah,
yeah, we
exactly.
get it all the time.
Oh, I'll never forget that. It was the funniest thing. And actually that lady, I I think she was a friend of my landlady as well or something. But yeah, that one was hilarious. The One of the officers had asked me about it, and he goes, "I didn't make you mad or anything." I was like, "Why?" I was like,
Yeah.
"But I just said what I had said. I thought it was funny." Oh, it was good stuff. Well, we are getting towards the end of this episode, and there was just a couple of things that I wanted to hit on really quick. First, one of the things that you teach as well, you do a lot of speaking engagements. We're going to get to that part here towards the end, where a lot of these engagements have been gone. But
Fun.
some of the training that you train on CPR as well. So when I was doing some traveling, I was at the airport in Indianapolis, and I saw that there was this big old machine where it had like a torso, and it had a body there, half of it, and you could actually practice and learn how to give CPR. And right on the screen, though, one of the funny things was it was a guy dressed like he pretty much looked like John Travolta from Staying Alive, and they had the song playing with the thing on there. It's the same?
Yeah.
Is it the same?
No. No.
It's changed now, right?
It
The rhythm
has.
and
It
everything?
has. The rhythm is still the same. You're still
Okay.
doing, but it's a lot harder to do now because you're doing 30 to 2 instead of 15 to 2. So you're pumping the chest at 30 times before you do 2 breaths. So if you're thinking that your breaths are going to be oh, this is when I get to relax a little bit. No, you're
Mhm.
doing 30 pumps before you get to the breath. So there's that. And I love teaching CPR, especially like people that they're like, do you think I can do this? And I'm like, oh, you can do anything. And I'm at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it's not as easy as we think. And they
Right.
start playing with the mannequin and they're like, this is hard work. And I'm like, yeah, it's hard work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an entire workout, and a lot of times, they'll tell you when you're getting trained, you are possibly going to crack, the chest as well. So if you hear it,
Mhm.
keep going.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that song was always there. They always played it, and then
And
I
they always
remember
ask me.
They
Because
do.
if they got, trained 30 years ago or 20 years ago, they were still playing that song. So they will go, so it's that the staying alive rhythm, right? And I'm like, sure, we'll go with that.
Because Another One Bites the Dust is also the same rhythm,
Right.
and
And
which is
it's
so
not the
bad.
same. Staying alive just has a nicer ring to it, especially when you're
Exactly.
doing CPR.
Right, exactly. Or the Imperial March, the Darth Vader music, it's the same rhythm. I don't One of my instructors told me both of those, and I remember sitting there looking at him, and I thought, "Damn, that's pretty dark." And he goes, "I know, right?"
I know. Well, and it's the thing now. Now, when you teach like the younger generation and you say staying alive, they look at you and they go, "What?" Huh?
Oh, well,
And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
"Oh, now I'm dating myself."
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, "I don't know what that is." Like, "Well, let me play
Yeah.
that for you." Like, "When was that from?" Like, "Were TVs in color at that time?" And like, "Yeah, dude. Yeah."
Yeah. Yeah.
As we go into the wrap up of this episode, this has been awesome to have you on and to
This
get
has
to know
been.
you. Um, it has just been excellent. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
You recently wrote a blog post, a guest blog post for the 911 Wonder Women group, and it's called Light My Fire. So tell me a little bit about this because there is a lot of parts in here. I mean, it really deals with um your personal feelings, getting into, a funk. There's things that have been canceled or postponed or what have you, and it's all cause this freaking pandemic. But everything that
Right.
you say in here just really fits so well. So please tell us a little bit about this.
So I found myself going from being in the office 5 days a week to coming in on a Friday and being like, well, the city's shutting everything down. And we can only have the dispatchers in the building. We can't, all the admin stuff's going to be working from home. And I'm like, great. We'll see how this is going to go. And in the beginning, it was fun because I got to be home with the kids and actually, see a little bit of what was going on and help them out with their schoolwork. And then it wasn't fun anymore. But I remember just thinking, one, you feel this guilt, and it's kind of like survival's guilt, right? Like you have your staff that's going in every day and getting exposed, and you're sitting at home and working from home. Like you have this luxury. And I pretty much still identify as a dispatcher.
Mhm.
Identify as a dispatcher. When people ask me what I do, that's what I do. I dispatch. I work in 911. I don't talk about my admin stuff because that stuff's not interesting. Um, so, uh, but yeah, so I had that. And then as the months went on and things started getting shut down, for example, APCO got shut down, and then APCO Atlantic got shut down, and then Nina, and everything else. And I'm like, what am I gonna like? I actually look forward to meeting people and talking to people. I mean, when we met, and I think it was Baltimore last year, or
Mhm.
the year before, I can't remember. I remember just being like, oh my God, like I get to meet these awesome people who are doing so much great, and actually be a part of an episode of Within the Trenches, and just kind of talk about things, and discuss how things are going in my center and how they compare to other people's center, and bring a little light and talk about the trainings that we're doing and talking about peer support and all the stuff that we started. It helps me kind of keep going. I'm very much a busybody. Like I need to be doing something at all times, and not having any of that to prepare for kind of put a damper on everything. And I was just like, what am I going to do with all this time that I have now that I'm not preparing for my talks? What am I going to do when I can't teach a CPR class anymore and I can't talk to old people about, staying alive? And or talking to young people about staying alive that have no idea what I'm talking about. So
Right.
that kind of started like wearing on me, and helping the kids too with everything, and trying to like come about. And one morning I woke up and I was just so depressed. I felt like I was really depressed. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to think about anything. And I felt in a complete funk. And when I say a complete funk, it was a complete funk. And I texted a couple of friends, Melissa Alterio and Tracy Eldridge, who
Mhm.
are like my support system when it comes to um, PTSD and peer support and teaching and all that stuff. So I texted the two of them and I said, friends, I am in a real funk. And they said to me, it's a collective. And we started exchanging stories and things that we were feeling. And all of a sudden, one of them says, how about we do a virtual meeting? And I said, okay, well, let's do a virtual meeting. And we invited another friend in, Jeremy DeMar from Mountain Valley now. And I said, all right, let's get together, let's talk. And we started talking and talking about the future and how things were affecting our individual PSAPs and how things were affecting Tracy in the private sector, and just kind of like talking it over. And kind of by the end of that call, I felt so much better. Honestly, like just having somebody that understands my language just made me feel that much better. And it was just like, they're not in my center, they're not dealing with the same things that I'm dealing. At the same time, they know exactly what I'm saying. So what I said on the blog post was, light that fire again. Look for your tribe, look for your people, and if it is your 911 people who actually can talk your 911 language, then that's what you should be looking for. I have plenty of friends who do different things, and I love to talk to them about other things, but they don't understand my 911 language. And that's important. It's important to find people who actually understand what you're going through and understand your 911 language, because we do have our own language.
Fully agree. And I was going to ask you must have been in my head while you were talking, because I was going to ask you, what advice do you have for those out there to get out of their funk? And you pretty much said it right there.
That's it. That's it. Just find people that can understand you and that speak your language, regardless of what it is, if it's 911 related or not 911 related. I'm not going to talk about my kids with people who don't have kids, because they usually can't relate. But I'll talk to a friend who has kids, and we can actually compare stories and talk about that. And it's the same thing. Like, you can't talk about our 911 stuff. You can't talk about the things that you're feeling because of a 911 call with somebody that has never taken a call, because they will not know how to relate to that.
Right.
And on
Well,
that note, I'm going to plug in one more thing, because
go for it.
that's where peer support comes into place so hard in and I feel like every center should strive to have one.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on. This was awesome.
Thank you. It was a
And
pleasure.
just learning more about you, and just right from the beginning, when you were talking about your mom, I was like, that's me.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's
Uh,
see, we can talk another language,
I
Latino
know.
moms.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on, and I know you've got to go here, but again, this has been such a pleasure and honor to have you on, to learn so much more about you and everything that you are doing. And I think we should do another episode. We
We
should do
should,
another episode soon.
definitely.
There's so much more that we could talk about as well. I'll be right back with you here. For those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that'll be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, it's wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This show will always be free. However, if you're looking for any bonus content, the behind the scenes series that I'm doing, the Singing Badly in My Car series that I do, discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, all types of stuff like that. Also, early episodes, released episodes, ad-free. You can hit us up right there on patreon.com/WTT podcast. And I wouldn't be able to do what I do without patrons and all of you for watching and listening. So thank you all very much. This live broadcast has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and the audio version can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net, and can be viewed on Facebook and YouTube. Have a good one. Make sure to check out and register for Dare to Be Great 2. That'll be October 6th through the 9th. Have a good one.